He said his bed was haunted, wanted me to sleep next to him, just in case, sleepover gay story. It was one of those perfect autumn evenings in our suburban neighborhood. The kind where the air feels crisp but not too cold, where the leaves crunch satisfyingly beneath your feet, and where the setting sun casts long shadows across neatly trimmed lawns. I remember it so vividly because it was the night everything changed between Jamie and me. My name is Alex, and at 17, I was navigating the complicated landscape of high school as a junior, maintaining decent grades, playing on the soccer team, and trying to figure out who I really was beneath all the expectations. I've always been the analytical type, the one who needs evidence before believing in anything, which is probably why Jamie and I balanced each other so well as friends. Jamie was everything I wasn't: spontaneous, wildly creative, and willing to believe in things that couldn't be proven with facts and figures. He had this infectious laugh that could light up a room, and this way of telling stories that made even the most mundane events sound like epic adventures. We'd been best friends since middle school, bonded initially over a shared love of sci-fi movies and video games. But our friendship had deepened over the years into something I couldn't quite define, but knew was special. That particular Friday, Jamie had been acting strange all day at school. He kept checking his phone, seemed distracted during lunch, and when I finally cornered him by his locker after the last bell, he leaned in close enough that I could smell the mint gum he was chewing, and whispered, "I need to tell you something, but not here. Come over tonight." There was an urgency in his voice that I couldn't ignore, so naturally, I agreed. What I didn't expect was the story he told me when I arrived at his house that evening. We were sitting in his bedroom, a familiar space decorated with movie posters and string lights that gave everything a warm glow. Jamie sat cross-legged on his bed, fidgeting with the sleeve of his sweater before finally looking me in the eye. "My bed is haunted," he said, with such seriousness that for a moment, I wasn't sure if I should laugh or be concerned. "I'm not kidding, Alex. Strange things have been happening for weeks now." Let me explain exactly what Jamie described to me that night, because the details matter to understand what happened next. According to Jamie, it had started with subtle things. His blankets would be arranged differently in the morning than how he left them at night, or he'd wake up feeling like someone had been sitting on the edge of his mattress. But then it escalated. He claimed he'd been hearing whispers just as he was falling asleep, unintelligible, but definitely there. Items would go missing from his nightstand only to reappear days later in completely different parts of his room. "Last night," Jamie continued, his voice dropping even lower, "I woke up at exactly 3:17 a.m. because my entire bed felt ice cold. Not just cool, Alex. Cold. Like I was sleeping on a block of ice. And there was this pressure, like someone was lying next to me." I studied his face carefully, looking for any signs that this was one of his elaborate pranks. Jamie loved a good practical joke, and had once spent 3 weeks convincing our entire friend group that he was distantly related to a famous actor just for the fun of it. But this time, there was something different in his expression, a vulnerability I rarely saw. "Have you told your parents?" I asked, trying to be practical. Jamie shook his head. "They'd either think I'm making it up for attention or worse. They'd believe me and call in some priest or medium or something equally embarrassing. You know how my mom gets about this stuff." He wasn't wrong. Jamie's mother was deeply superstitious, the type who threw salt over her shoulder and refused to walk under ladders. If Jamie told her his bed was haunted, we'd have an exorcism on our hands by sundown. "So what do you want to do about it?" I asked, still not entirely convinced, but willing to hear him out. That's when he hit me with it, the request that would change everything. "I want you to sleep over tonight," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "Just sleep next to me, just in case." There was something in the way he said it, a mixture of genuine fear and something else I couldn't quite identify, that made my heart beat a little faster. Jamie and I had had countless sleepovers over the years, but we'd long since outgrown sharing a bed. The last time had probably been when we were 13 or 14, before growth spurts and an increasing awareness of personal space had relegated one of us to the floor or the air mattress. "You want me to be your ghost bodyguard?" I teased, trying to lighten the mood while I processed his request. Jamie smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I know it sounds stupid, but I haven't slept properly in days, and I'd feel better if you were there. You don't believe in this stuff, so maybe nothing will happen if you're around." I thought about it for a moment. It was Friday night. I didn't have any other plans, and despite my skepticism, I was admittedly curious. Plus, if Jamie was genuinely scared, whether of an actual ghost or just his own imagination, wasn't that what friends were for? To help each other through the scary parts? Okay, I agreed finally. But if this is some elaborate prank to make me look like an idiot, I swear I'll never forgive you. The relief on Jamie's face was immediate and genuine. Thank you, he said simply. I promise it's not a prank. We spent the next few hours doing what we always did during sleepovers, playing video games, arguing about movies, and demolishing an unhealthy amount of snacks. Jamie's parents were away for the weekend visiting his grandmother, which meant we had the house to ourselves except for Jamie's younger brother, Tyler, who was staying at a friend's house that night. As the evening progressed, I noticed Jamie had gone all out with the snacks. All my favorites were there, including the specific brand of root beer I loved that his family didn't usually buy. He'd also queued up a marathon of our favorite sci-fi series on his laptop. It was thoughtful in a way that made me feel a strange warmth in my chest. You really went all out for this ghost stakeout, I commented as I cracked open another can of root beer. Jamie shrugged, but I caught the slight smile on his lips. Well, if we're going to face supernatural forces, we might as well be well-fed and entertained while we do it. Around midnight, our conversation shifted from casual banter to something deeper. Maybe it was the late hour, or the intimacy of sitting side by side on Jamie's bed with our backs against the wall, laptop balanced between us. But suddenly we were talking about things we usually avoided. Do you ever wonder what happens after we die? Jamie asked during a lull between episodes. Like, is it just nothing? Or do we stick around somehow? I considered the question seriously. I don't know. I'd like to think there's something more, but I've never seen any evidence for it. What about you? Do you really believe in ghosts? Jamie was quiet for a moment. I believe there are things we can't explain, he said finally. Things science hasn't figured out yet. And I believe that sometimes people leave impressions behind. Energy or something. And you think that's what's happening with your bed? Someone left an impression? He turned to look at me, his face half illuminated by the glow of the laptop screen. I don't know what's happening, Alex. That's what scares me. There was such honesty in his voice that I felt a pang of guilt for my skepticism. Whether or not his bed was actually haunted, Jamie's fear was real, and that's what mattered. Well, I said, bumping my shoulder against his, whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. The smile he gave me then was worth any number of potentially sleepless nights. Around 1 a.m., we decided to actually try to sleep. Jamie disappeared into the bathroom to change and brush his teeth, while I changed into the sweatpants and t-shirt I'd brought for sleeping. When he returned, I noticed he was wearing a faded band t-shirt I'd given him for his birthday last year. It was oddly touching that he'd kept it as sleepwear. The moment of actually getting into bed together was more awkward than I'd anticipated. We both hesitated, standing on opposite sides of the mattress. So, which side do you want? Jamie asked, running a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I'd noticed over the years. I'll take the left, I said, mainly because that put me closer to the door. If there was going to be any midnight ghostly activity, I wanted a clear escape route. We settled in, careful to maintain a respectful distance between us. Jamie turned off the lamp on his nightstand, plunging the room into darkness except for the faint glow of streetlights filtering through his curtains. Thanks for doing this, Jamie said softly into the darkness. I know you think I'm being ridiculous. I don't think you're ridiculous, I replied honestly. I just think there's probably a logical explanation for whatever you've been experiencing. Like what? I thought for a moment. Maybe it's a draft making the room cold. Or maybe you're having particularly vivid dreams. Our brains can do weird things, especially when we're stressed or not sleeping well. Maybe, Jamie conceded, though he didn't sound convinced. We lay there in silence for a while, and I was just starting to drift off when a loud crash from downstairs jolted us both upright. What was that? Jamie whispered, his hand instinctively grabbing my arm. Probably just something fell, I said, though my heart was racing. Your house makes noises all the time. Not like that, Jamie insisted. That sounded like it was in the kitchen. Before I could suggest a reasonable explanation, all the lights went out. Not just the small night light in the corner of Jamie's room, but the street lights outside too. The house was plunged into complete darkness. Power outage, I said immediately, reaching for my phone on the nightstand to use as a flashlight. Probably the whole block. But Jamie's grip on my arm tightened. The power doesn't just go out for no reason, Alex. Just as I was about to argue that yes, sometimes power does go out for no apparent reason, especially in our aging neighborhood with its outdated electrical grid. We heard it, a distinct creaking sound, like someone slowly walking up the stairs. Now, I consider myself a rational person. I don't believe in ghosts or monsters or things that go bump in the night. But in that moment, in the pitch darkness of Jamie's room, with that methodical creaking getting closer and closer, I felt a primal fear that bypassed all my logical reasoning. "Jamie," I whispered, "is there anyone else who could be in the house?" "No," he whispered back, and I could hear the fear in his voice. "My parents are 3 hours away, and Tyler is at his friend's house." The creaking stopped, right outside Jamie's bedroom door. We both held our breath, frozen in place. Then, slowly, the doorknob began to turn. I'd like to say I reacted bravely, but the truth is I practically launched myself across the bed, pressing my back against the wall and pulling Jamie with me. We huddled together, his arm around my shoulders, mine around his waist, as the door slowly swung open. For a long, terrible moment, nothing happened. The doorway was just a slightly darker rectangle in an already dark room. Then, a whisper, so faint I almost thought I'd imagined it. "Jamie." Jamie's entire body tensed against mine. "Did you hear that?" He breathed, his lips so close to my ear that I could feel his warm breath. I nodded, unable to speak, because I had heard it, clear as day, and there was no way it was just the house settling or the wind or any of the rational explanations I desperately wanted to cling to. "We should check it out," I said finally, surprising myself with the suggestion. "Are you insane?" Jamie hissed. "That's exactly how people die in horror movies." "Well, we can't just sit here all night," I reasoned, though the thought of actually getting out of bed and investigating the source of that whisper made my stomach churn with fear. Besides, there has to be a logical explanation. Jamie was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Together?" he asked, and there was something in his voice, a vulnerability that made my chest ache. "Together," I confirmed. Slowly, we disentangled ourselves and edged toward the side of the bed. I used my phone's flashlight, which seemed pathetically inadequate against the darkness surrounding us. Jamie grabbed a baseball bat he kept in his closet, a relic from the one summer his parents had insisted he try sports, and we inched toward the open doorway. The hallway was empty, but the creaking had started again, this time coming from downstairs. We made our way down the hall to the staircase, moving as quietly as possible. Jamie was so close behind me that I could feel the warmth of his body, a reassuring presence in the darkness. As we reached the bottom of the stairs, the flashlight beam caught something moving in the kitchen. A shadow, darting quickly out of sight. "Did you see that?" Jamie whispered, his free hand gripping the back of my t-shirt. I nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. Every instinct was telling me to run back upstairs, to hide under the covers and wait for morning. But curiosity, or maybe some misplaced sense of bravery, pushed me forward. The kitchen was a mess. A chair was overturned, and what looked like cereal was scattered across the floor. The back door was slightly ajar, swinging gently in the breeze. "Someone was here," I said, shining the light around the room. "An actual person, not a ghost." Jamie lowered the baseball bat slightly. "But who would he?" He was cut off by a giggle, high-pitched and unmistakably human, coming from behind the kitchen island. We both whirled toward the sound, Jamie raising the bat again, me pointing the flashlight. And there, crouched behind the counter with a guilty grin on his face, was Tyler, Jamie's 12-year-old brother. "Gotcha," he exclaimed, jumping to his feet. The relief that flooded through me was quickly replaced by confusion, then understanding, then indignation. "Tyler? What are you doing here? Jamie said you were at a friend's house." Tyler's grin widened. "I was, but I came back early. Mom and Dad gave me a key, remember? I saw Jamie's text to you about the haunted bed and thought it would be fun to play along." I turned to Jamie, expecting to see the same mixture of relief and annoyance I was feeling. But instead, his face had gone pale, his eyes wide. "My text," he repeated. "What text?" Tyler's smile faltered. "The one you sent Alex about your bed being haunted. I saw it on your phone when you left it in the kitchen earlier this week." There was a moment of tense silence as Jamie and I looked at each other. I could see the realization dawning on his face at the same time it hit me. There had never been any haunting. Jamie had made it all up as an excuse to get me to sleep over, to sleep next to him. "Tyler," Jamie said, his voice strained, "go to your room. Now." Tyler looked between us, confusion replacing his triumphant expression. But I thought. "Now, Tyler," Jamie repeated, more firmly this time. Once Tyler had trudged upstairs, grumbling about how we couldn't take a joke, Jamie and I were left alone in the kitchen. The power was still out, my phone flashlight the only illumination, casting strange shadows across Jamie's face. "Alex," he began, but I cut him off. "You made it up," I said, not a question but a statement. "There was never any ghost." Jamie looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "I can explain." And he did explain, right there in the dark kitchen with cereal crunching under our feet. He explained how he'd been trying to find the courage to tell me how he felt for months. How he'd rehearsed speeches and planned moments, only to lose his nerve every time. How the idea of the haunted bed had come to him suddenly, a way to create closeness without risking outright rejection. "I know it was stupid," he finished, still looking at the floor. "And manipulative. I didn't know how else to tell you that I like you. As more than a friend." There it was, the truth, finally out in the open. And strangely, despite the deception that had led to this moment, I wasn't angry. Because the truth was, I'd been harboring my own feelings for Jamie for longer than I cared to admit, even to myself. "You could have just told me," I said softly. "You didn't need to invent a ghost." Jamie finally looked up, hope cautiously dawning in his eyes. "Would you have been okay with it? If I had just told you?" I took a step closer to him, close enough that I could see the individual flecks of gold in his brown eyes, even in the dim light. "Why don't you try it now and find out?" Jamie took a deep breath. "Alex, I like you. I've liked you for a long time. As more than just my best friend." The words hung between us for a moment, and then I did something I'd been thinking about for months but never had the courage to do. I leaned in and kissed him. It was brief, just a gentle press of lips, but it felt like the most natural thing in the world. When I pulled back, Jamie was looking at me with a mixture of shock and joy that made my heart skip. "So," I said, trying to sound casual despite the fact that my heart was racing, "your bed isn't actually haunted?" Jamie laughed, the sound bright and relieved in the darkness. "No, definitely not haunted." "Good," I replied, taking his hand. "Because I think I'd still like to sleep in it tonight, if that's okay with you." We made our way back upstairs, hand in hand, pausing only to knock on Tyler's door and extract a promise that there would be no more ghostly pranks for the rest of the night. The power came back on just as we were settling back into Jamie's bed, but this time, there was no awkward distance between us. Instead, Jamie curled against my side, his head resting on my shoulder, my arm around him. "I'm sorry for lying," he murmured against my chest. "About the haunting." I ran my fingers through his hair, marveling at how right this felt. "I forgive you. But next time you want to cuddle, just ask." I felt rather than saw his smile. "Next time?" "Definitely next time," I confirmed, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. As we drifted off to sleep, I couldn't help but think about how sometimes the things we fear most, rejection, vulnerability, the unknown, are exactly what we need to face to find what we're looking for. Jamie had invented a ghost because he was afraid to reveal his true feelings, and I had been equally afraid to acknowledge my own. But now that the truth was out, it felt like the beginning of something wonderful. The next morning, we woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains and the sound of birds outside. Jamie was still nestled against me, his arm draped across my chest, looking more peaceful than I'd seen him in weeks. "Morning," he mumbled, blinking up at me sleepily. "No ghost attacks in the night." I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Imagine that. We spent the rest of the weekend together, cleaning up Tyler's mess in the kitchen, watching movies, and talking, really talking, about everything we'd been too afraid to say before. About when we'd first realized our feelings, about our fears and hopes, about what this meant for us going forward. By Sunday evening, when I reluctantly had to go home, we had a plan. We'd take things slow, figure out together how to navigate this new dimension of our relationship. We weren't in a rush to tell everyone. This felt too precious, too new to share just yet, but we weren't going to hide either. As I was leaving, standing on his front porch with my overnight bag slung over my shoulder, Jamie leaned in for one more kiss. "So," he said with a mischievous glint in his eye, "same time next weekend?" I think I heard some suspicious noises in my closet that might need investigating. I laughed, pulling him in for another quick kiss. "No more ghost stories, remember? Just ask." He smiled, soft and genuine. "Will you stay over next weekend, Alex?" "Just because I want you to. And really, how could I say no to that?" As I walked home through the same suburban streets where our story had begun just 2 nights before, I couldn't help but smile to myself. Jamie had claimed his bed was haunted because he wanted me to sleep next to him, just in case. It turned out, the only thing haunting either of us had been our unspoken feelings for each other. And now that those feelings were out in the open, I couldn't wait to see what other adventures awaited us, supernatural or otherwise. Total underscore char underscore count, 17,682.